where you be right now. Yeah. Right. And then make it worthwhile. That's why it can't all be for naught. Any more than
I know they meant anyway. What? I don't know for sure.
Take one coming up, August, April 8th, next week. What's her name? You got Melanie and you got.
Space cadet.
No, very much so. That's from
So all these people from Germany, they should be running for?
That's up with what, 4 inch, a weekend or something?
It's Tammy?
Yeah, I feel like it's just.
I don't know, it started at half the weekend and half the day. Another week, so like morning holiday, but they're both out. Yeah, because she didn't, up in the car.
And when is that election taking place?
8, April 8th.
Right.
Well, it's shortly after 6, and I think everyone's present who is planning on being here this evening. I would like to call to order the 15th regular meeting of the Board of Directors of SAD 52, and if Joanne could lead us in the pledge. Thank you. Our first order of business would be to act on the minutes of March 24th. Any errors or omissions on those? Seeing none, we'll accept those under general consent. Brings us to communications. Kim.
I'd like to report the following resignations. Dennis Smith, District 1 bus driver, that was effective in January, and Cindy Weber, Tripp Middle School team leader, effective June 15th. And that's just the team leader part of it. That.
Thank you. That brings us to agenda item number 4, and that is the budget work session. And item 4.1 indicates that for this evening's work session, we will review any remaining items on our revisit list, and after that review, we'll move to an adoption of that final proposed fiscal year 23 budget. So I'll turn this back over to Kim to recap where we are.
We had 3 things on the revisit list for this evening. The first was the Facilities and Transportation Director. Second was the Adult Ed Line 51010 Workforce Training. And then a follow-up on the additional gas and diesel costs, as well as the vape detectors at the high school. So to begin with the Facilities and Transportation Director, I would like to propose to the board that after looking at comparative data, that we increase that salary from $69,000, which it currently is, to $75,000.
Would you like to see a motion for that, Kim?
Yes, please.
Do we have a motion for that? Yuri, do we have a second?
I'll second.
Crystal? Discussion on that? Any discussion? Richard?
What's the rationale for the increase?
Taking a look at what other districts are paying similar positions, we are a little lower than what other districts are paying. So it's to keep us competitive.
Joanne?
Question, were they same size districts or were they just nearby?
Thank you. There's a combination of both of those, Joanne. We compare ourselves generally for contract negotiations to certain districts, but also I look at the list of like-sized districts.
Other discussion on this one? Seeing none, all those in favor of adjusting that line? Those opposed?
I'm abstaining, it just seems like a lot of money to me.
One opposed and one abstained. Motion carries. That brings us to the adult ed workforce position. And Dean, that's one that you were going to research that line?
Yes.
I'm not sure we have a microphone down there.
So yes, I did take a look at that and also talked with our director, Brian Brito, and it was decided that we do not have the grant funding to cover that decrease. So I put the amount back in, restored it to what it was. And to do that, I moved in the budget money to that line, which was $1,406,000. I'm sorry, 1,400, 1,500, 400, 6,300, 1,51010, and the related benefits, which is 52010, and that's a total of $7,744.67. And a decreased, we have a line there that's labeled as the 18 to 20-year-old subsidy money. And that's under the general fund, and that is in line 1,400, 6,000, 2,300, 59160.
So what was the net effect of that, Dean?
So the net effect on the bottom line for the tax rate, there was no impact to it.
We had one more item on the revisit list, and that was continued follow-up on the gas and diesel. Was that? Yeah, you're gonna want to steal that back from me anyway. So.
Okay, great. So yes, and let's see. With the diesel fuel, we did lock into a contract at $3.31 a gallon. And that left $13,950 that would need to be added back to the budget, which I have done. And that diesel fuel line is under the transportation warrant article. It's account 1,900 0000 2700 56262. And do you want me to talk about the gasoline as well?
Yes, please.
Okay. So the gasoline account, that is not contracted. We don't have the ability to do that without a bulk storage tank. So I've estimated that we would need another $36,000 in that line. And that line is 1,900 0000 2700 56261. And so I have put that into our figures for tonight.
Anything else on the revisit list that I am missing?
Uh,
If not, I'll pass it over to Kim.
Okay. No, nothing else on the revisit list, but important information is that insurance had been budgeted at 10%, according to what our carrier had told us to possibly expect. They recently contacted Dean to let us know that the highest it would be 8%. So this current amount reflects the Anthem budget at 8%. Keeping in mind that 1% is almost $37,000. So that would be about $74,000, and that covers both the additional cost of diesel and gas, as well as the vape detectors at the high school.
So just to make sure that we're clear, the numbers that board members received this evening, summarizing revenues and summarizing tax impacts with, it's like the spaghetti sauce. It's all in there. The only thing that wouldn't be in there would be the additional monies added to the Facilities and Transportation Director this evening. Is that
Correct, that's correct.
accurate? So that brings us to tax impacts for our three towns of an average of 3.67%. And it also leaves us with the one with a budgeted number on insurance at 8%, which is the maximum. We do not have that actual rate currently.
Right.
Okay, thank you. Questions from board members on either any of those revisit list items or any other remaining budget items? Yuri?
I was hoping that we could make a motion so that if the insurance rate comes in at less than that 8% that we carried, we had the ability to make that adjustment in the budget books before they went out to the town and the vote, so that we didn't have just that 8% placeholder in the budget, but it could be reflect the actual.
I believe we can do that in our motion to adopt, and then we can simply make those corrections when we receive those rates, because we've typically received those rates at approximately the same time as we approve our budget, so we would, in theory, have that prior to this going to the voters. I would entertain a motion for adoption of the budget as presented. Yuri?
I would make that motion with the ability to lower that insurance rate from 8% once we know what the actual rate is.
Do we have a second? Crystal? Discussion? See none? All those in favor? Opposed? One abstain. Motion passes. Thanks, everybody, for all the work on the budget process. It's certainly not a small task. So for our next budget work session, April 7th, is housekeeping, and more housekeeping. Before I run through that housekeeping list, I would remind folks that when we look back over the last few years, stretching back to fiscal year 17, our tax impact to our communities has been fairly moderate. 6.16% in fiscal year 17, 18 was 4.92, 19 was 4.08, 20 was 1.8, 21 was 0. Fiscal year 22 was 3.64%, which was approximately $794,000 when the district received additional unanticipated state subsidy. 300,000 of that did go back to the town, so that's would suggest that that did not net out at 3.64%. And what we are recommending as a board this evening that was just voted on is a 3.67% tax impact to our three communities. So back to housekeeping. Our next budget work session is April 7th, which is next week, and we have several items that need to happen from a statute standpoint. We need to act on, with specific motions for each one, any proposed creation and elimination of positions. These are not new actions. These are things that are embedded in the budget that was just approved. We also need to specifically call the district budget meeting and call the district budget validation referendum. Again, these are official steps. These don't have any impact on what the dates of those events are. They are things that we're required by statute to complete. And as a reminder, the district budget vote is May 5th, right here in the auditorium at 6 p.m. And that brings us to the conclusion of our budget work session for this evening. Adjustment to the agenda. Do we have any of those?
Yes. I ask the board to remove items 10.2 and 10.3. Those are requests for executive session and any action is warranted.
Thank you. That brings us to committee reports. Finance, Yuri.
We did not meet this week.
PTB, and Jessica is absent this evening, so I will cover that one. The committee heard from Dave Roberts, who is not only our fearless leader in the food service area, he is also our licensed water operator for the district, and he updated us that as a result of LD 153, there are different parameters, more all-inclusive parameters around testing for lead in school drinking water than the previous federal cycles that we had been under in that regard. The federal statute states a 15 parts per billion level was a threshold. This new legislation indicates that all water sources within the school that could reasonably be used for drinking water or cooking need to be tested, and also recommends a 4 parts per billion threshold. That testing will be wrapped up by the end of May, so we will stay tuned to hear more about those results. And we have not had significant, actually only one in, I want to say, 18-ish years of Dave's experience that was an issue as far as that federal threshold was concerned, and that was in central office and was easily resolved with some plumbing changes there. So that's, stay tuned on the results from that. Dave also indicated to folks that later on in the year there will be water sampling, drinking water sampling for PFAS, often known as the forever chemicals, and there seemed to be more information to come on that one, and I think that's probably an understatement on that whole set of things. So we will hear more about that as the year goes on. The third item we talked about was the wastewater treatment plant process. Based on some meetings this last week with Wright Pierce, the company that's doing the design work on that project for us, they are behind. They had anticipated a completion date of not August, but by the end of the year, 2022. It certainly sounds like it's behind from there, so we look forward to learning more from them about what steps are next to get us back on track on that process. We touched briefly on the capital projects list that we had discussed at an earlier meeting, and Dean indicated that he is currently gathering more information on characterizing any of those projects. So I would say stay tuned on all 4 of those items. Curriculum policy, Joanne.
We have not met, but we are meeting Tuesday night, April 5th.
Thank you. Student representatives report. Tristan, I think that you have a microphone. Fantastic.
Yeah, doesn't seem to be working. Great. This week at Levitt, the Arts Gala program celebrated its 20th anniversary, although not admittedly the true 20th as that was in, I believe. It's not the true 20th anniversary, as that was several years ago in 2020, I believe. It could not be celebrated then due to the global pandemic. Roughly 80% of students will have worked with at least one artist for the program during this week. and reports indicate a strong turnout and satisfaction with the program. That concludes the student representative's report.
Thank you, Tristan. That brings us to administrative report. Jana Mates.
I had asked our Principal Mates, she actually volunteered, and we talked about her giving some more information about what the work that's being done in the crew block that happens every day, and how that relates to what is being taught, related to social, emotional learning, and how important that is, and how that is working out for students at the middle school.
Good evening. It's true, I asked Superintendent Brand if I could share with the board this evening. I wanted to share more about Tripp Middle School and our efforts and energies this year. Since starting in MSAD 52 this year, I've been incredibly proud of the resilience of our staff and students. We have some great staff and we have some really, really good kids. Sometimes those really good kids make bad choices though. For weeks now, I have watched and listened as some parents and students have shared their realities of bullying in our schools. Their message is clear, that we have to do more. For weeks, I've also watched and listened as some parents share their beliefs that schools do not have the responsibility to teach social emotional learning in our classrooms. So once again, we are divided. Although I am a new administrator, in 52, I am not new to administration. This is my 9th year as a building leader. I was also a classroom teacher for 12 years. What education looks like has changed. It's been changing for years. But the last few years of the pandemic, that has turned the world of education upside down. In addition to furthering an academic divide, student behaviors and mental health are more concerning than ever. It isn't specific to our community. It's a nationwide concern, but it's also one that we cannot ignore. I assure the board and our greater community we're not crossing lines in our efforts to support students. We're not trying to be their parents. We're trying to work together with families to ensure that every student gets what he or she needs to be successful. Sometimes that means a little bit more support with math and reading and writing. Sometimes that means a little more support with understanding their emotions, behaviors, and the consequences of their actions. At TMS this year, we implemented a crew block. This is a 30-minute period that meets at the end of every day. At TMS, crew is both a structure and a culture. The term crew comes from the educator Kurt Hahn, who's the founder of Outward Bound. He quotes, "We are crew, not passengers. Everyone has something to contribute to the success of the mission." The culture of crew impels all members of the school community to work together as a team, to pitch in and to help others. The structure of our crew, daily meetings to support learning and growth, makes time for students to build these meaningful relationships with peers and their crew leader. It's also a time to monitor academic progress and focus on character development. Ideally, crew is a place where all students feel they belong and can succeed. During this time, we are not teaching critical race theory or preaching religious views. It's not sex education or a political debate. It is a non-academic time to focus on habits of character. Qualities like respect, responsibility, courage, and kindness. The same habits of character in our MSAD 52 Code of Conduct. Our goal is to discuss these habits of character daily, to model these habits of character daily, and to hold each other accountable for these habits of character daily. Our goal is to create a learning community where everyone belongs, where everyone feels safe, where students don't bully each other because we've worked hard to create a culture of respect and acceptance. Some days crew looks like TMS Winter Olympics or scavenger hunts across the school campus. Other days it looks like 10 students circled up with their crew leader talking about behaviors or what it means if you're going to have a guest teacher or sub in the building the next day. In short, TMS isn't just a building for academic learning. It's a place where students have a sense of belonging and purpose, where they are challenged and supported, and where they have equitable opportunities to thrive academically, socially, and emotionally. Thank you.
Thank you. That brings us to superintendent's report. Kim?
Thank you, Jen. So at our last board meeting, there was the suggestion about a school resource officer that was brought up. So we did speak as an administrative group about that. I know that in the district, years ago, there was a school resource officer for a short period of time. I also believe that a budget decision needed to be made between a school resource officer or an assistant principal, and the then principal, who I believe was Mr. Hartnett, chose the assistant principal because that person can do more in terms of supporting students. Is that accurate, Evan?
That is accurate, yes.
Okay, thank you. So we did discuss it, and all of us felt like with the resources that we have, our highest priority is to have social work services available for general ed students at the elementary level. So if we had an endless list of things that we could have, would we want to talk a little bit more about an SRO? We would. But knowing that we don't have that, our highest priority is for the direct and immediate service in terms of social work services to our general ed students. The Facilities and Transportation Director Interview Committee is progressing in their work, and the committee has chosen the candidates that the team will interview. And thank you again to the members of that committee. The data that we have this week related to COVID is that Androscoggin County remains in low in terms of community transmission. Our number of vaccinated students remains the same at 50 to 54%. As far as numbers of positive cases this week, in Green Central School, we had 2. In Leeds Central School, 0. At Turner Primary School, 2. In Turner Elementary School, 0. At Tripp Middle School, 0. And at the high school, 2. As far as the pool testing and the numbers of positive pools we had in the schools, we had no positive pools in any of the schools this week. That is extremely hopeful information to have. So again, 0 positive pools in any of our schools this week, which is wonderful. Hospitalization rates provided by the CDC. People in the hospital for COVID, 97. Those in critical care, 16. And those on a ventilator, 4. And I thank our nurses who continue to run the pool testing program for our students and staff. Thank you to Principal Shaw, who will be going to Farmington, I think Wednesday afternoon, evening, to conduct mock job interviews with student teachers who will soon be graduating from Farmington. This is always a good chance both to help these teachers soon to be hone skills, as well as to make some important connections that will hopefully encourage them to consider our district when they get to the point where they are searching for a job. And congratulations to Iva Damon for being named the Art Teacher of the Year for the secondary level. Iva was nominated by the Maine Art Education Association for her work in organizing and running their spring conferences for the last 2 years, for chairing the visual art writing standards with the Department of Education last summer, and for her work in the Maine Arts Education Partners leadership. Iva will receive her award on April 2nd, this coming Saturday. Iva's colleague and performing arts leader Sarah Dow said that Iva is first and foremost incredibly dedicated to her students' well-being. She diligently works to ensure that her students are safe in her classroom, knowing that she is unable to reach them if they are not fully present. She is an incredible artist who shares her knowledge in a clear and effective way with her students. And aside from being a stellar teacher, she is an amazing colleague and leader. Our district is very lucky to have her. I also wanted to share an anonymous quote from one of Iva's students who said, "Ms. Damon is an amazing art teacher. She spends time trying to find things that everyone in her class will enjoy and lets her students use their own creativity in her class. Not only does she spend time in class helping students, she also has a day that she dedicates to helping students after school to get caught up. She encourages her students to use as much creativity as they can. I appreciate her." So congratulations, Iva Damon, and I agree we are very lucky to have you on our MSAD 52 team.
Thank you, Kim. Always good to hear some good news of the excellent work that is going on within the district. Crystal.
I just have a question because I have some questions, but I don't know if they should go now or if they should go potentially with a new business if there is a motion to potentially follow my questions. New business. Okay, thank you.
That brings us to public comment, and I will recap the policy for folks as we have been doing. The board will designate a portion of its agenda as an opportunity for public participation. During the time allotted for public participation, members of the public may speak on any subject directly related to the operations of the schools, except for personal matters or complaints concerning specific employees or students, which shall be addressed through established policies and procedures. Members of the public may address the board within the guidelines provided in this policy. The chair shall be responsible for maintaining proper order and compliance with these guidelines. Citizens and employees of the school unit are welcome to participate as provided in this policy. Others may be recognized to speak at the chair's discretion. Individual employees and/or employee groups will not be permitted to discuss matters for which complaint or grievance procedures are provided. The chair may limit the time allotted for comments on a particular topic, as well as the time each individual may speak, and that time limit is at 3 minutes currently. In the event of a sizable audience, the chair may require persons interested in speaking to sign up so that they may be called on in a fair and efficient manner. During the time set aside for public participation, the chair will be responsible for recognizing all speakers who must identify themselves as they begin talking. Speakers are not permitted to share gossip, make defamatory comments, or use abusive or vulgar language. All speakers are to address the chair and direct questions or comments to particular board members of the superintendent only with approval of the chair. Requests for information or concerns that require further research may be referred to the superintendent to be addressed at a later time. Members of the board and the superintendent may ask questions of any person who addresses the board, but are expected to refrain from arguing or debating issues. Questions must be addressed through the chair. No complaints or allegations will be allowed at board meetings concerning any person employed by the school system or against particular students. Personal matters or complaints concerning student or staff issues will not be considered in a public meeting, but will be referred through established policies and procedures. In order to make efficient use of meeting time, the board discourages duplication or repetition of comments to the board. The board requests that groups or organizations be represented by designated spokespersons. The chair has the authority to stop any presentation that violates these guidelines or the privacy rights of others. Persons who disrupt the meeting may be asked to leave, and the chair may request law enforcement assistance as necessary to restore order. And there is a sign-up sheet at the podium.
Crystal Nicholas from Green. In 1935, during the mounting political tension preceding the Spanish Civil War, 3 surrealist artists collaborated to create a delicate pencil drawing. It portrays the shell of an isolated figure, damaged yet proud, using at least one crutch and having what appears to be an empty sack, or possibly an onion, it's hard to tell, for a head. This drawing reaches out to us across nearly a century as evidence of alienation and confusion in a time where promoted strategies for survival changed month by month. There was constant terror of one sort or another, where no one was safe. The artists of this drawing were struggling to make sense of the political turmoil engulfing them and entitled their work, "One Wants to Know the Reasons Why." When we deal with a traumatic event, we endeavor to come to terms with it by knowing the reasons why. When I ask trusted elected officials or those who are politically active, why did the schools torture the children, and why would no one talk about it? Even the newspaper would not report that I asked a direct question about children being injured by school policy, and the meeting was adjourned rather than acknowledge that. And whenever I inquire, I am directed to the ESSER grant, that plethora of money scooped up by schools in the COVIDian era of our New World Order. I am told that the school representative certifies compliance with all provisions and requirements under penalty of the False Claims Act. Separate from this pledge is a section that outlines that a school must attest that their plan for safe return describes the requirements stated. That is, the extent to which it has adopted policies and a description of any such policies on each of the CDC's recommendations. And the very first recommendation, universal and correct wearing of masks. Now, mind you, there is no straightforward language of describe your masking policy. No, the wording of this document is very circuitous, but then I would expect no less of the DOE and their ilk, slippery words for slippery folk. Yet we are assured by the same ones who tortured our children that there was no money for masks. It is an assurance that I rather hope is true, for I certainly cannot believe it.
Hello, Jimmy Child from Leeds. I want to thank Ms. Mates for that information. I mean, it's nice to have some information. It feels that, yeah, there is a big divide among the community, among the world, among all of us. I choose to try to close that divide if I can, but I'm the type of person that I like to try to stand my ground if I think something's truthful or right, if I do research that I see, you know, points me in that direction. The social emotional learning thing, well, very nice words. I read the curriculum for my son's grade. I mean, I don't oppose teaching, you know, them type of actions. Seems really good. I think it's where you get into the older kids, it might be a problem. But, you know, that's varying. There's parts of it that bug me, like, so I don't know if our guidance counselors or whoever, like, are teaching different pronouns and stuff. Like, so it just took my little boy finally understands her is mom or Grammy, him is dad, grandpa, you know, him and her. That's what we teach them. That's what every single person, I bet you, here in this world, maybe not recently, but every one of us have always taught our kids, him, her, boy, girl, man, woman, whatever. Somebody gets 18, maybe 17, they want to go do something different. They can do that. We'll accept that. I wouldn't teach my kid to pick on them, do anything like that. That's their own business. Okay? Maybe in high school, you know, maybe stuff's a little funny. People think they're, you know, they want to be different. And that's fine. We can teach inclusiveness like that. That's fine. But for younger kids, 5th graders, my kid, they don't need to have anybody, there's nobody in authority here to teach them that there's another gender, or it could be they or them. It's him and her. When they get older, if they want to change that, and we can accept people, if younger kids are getting taught that by their parents or whatever, that is plain child abuse. I can't do things like, that just sexually provokes these children, you know? They're older, maybe high schoolish, you know, times have changed, we understand that, you know, and we can work with that. These kids in elementary and even middle school, you know, I have nephews in middle school, they're still too young to know that stuff. They really are. When they start being able to, hey, well, it ain't him or her. Okay, so now that goes against everything that these parents teach him and her. With all due respect, there's nobody in this building that has the authority to go over us parents teaching him and her. And I mean that respectively. You know, I understand you guys have a hard job, and I appreciate it. No matter if we agree or disagree, that's just, I appreciate it. You know, but teaching them that goes against us. You know, we ain't a big religious people. We believe in God. We believe in Jesus. When we pledge that flag, we use the term God in it.
We're at 3 minutes.
Okay.
Thank you.
So, don't religiously discriminate against the children. Thank you. Thank you.
Anthony Shostak, Green. Confidence is built on trust, and both are essential for society to function. Parents need to have confidence that teachers and school administrators have the knowledge and critical thinking abilities to provide a rigorous education that lets children of all learning styles develop to their potential. That confidence is eroded when trust is betrayed, when, for instance, those in authority fail to nip bullying in the bud. It's nice to hear that there are measures in place for that. Or fail to carefully curate school library collections to ensure that prurient content is not included, or fail to acknowledge and honor a parent's authority with regard to their children's health, or fail to demonstrate that they not only give stakeholders in the schools the opportunity to comment, but that they actually listen and care about what people have to say. I made a Freedom of Access Act request to the superintendent for documents related to her or the school board's research into and/or discussion of a number of masking-related issues, some of which were risks to physical and mental health, negative impacts on learning, the efficacy of masks in reducing COVID transmission, the necessity and desirability of mask breaks and accommodations for those with special needs. I was provided, several weeks later, with no documents at all, just 2 hot links, one to the CDC's homepage and the other to Maine CDC's. Assuming that the response was truthful, one can deduce that there was 0 discussion or research. That is simply unconscionable. Parents have cited various studies showing that masks are ineffective against COVID, and we have enumerated several risks to masking, and that there is no document trail to show any kind of follow-up. Apparently, this administration thinks that it is enough to simply nod politely while community members say our piece and then ignore us. That is a breach of trust. That breach erodes confidence. Do that long enough, and the public has no confidence whatsoever. I'll caution too that ideological indoctrination in school is also a breach of trust. Our state's Department of Education unabashedly promotes anti-racist education. Its website going so far as to say, quote, expecting all school personnel to engage in professional learning about anti-racism, unquote. I am sure that the wording of that is lost on no one, but to spell it out, there's a fundamental difference between the neutral, not racist, and the highly political, anti-racist. The fact that bureaucrats think it fit that the schools be wielded as a partisan weapon in an ideological war is unacceptable, and the fact that there is so little dissent is telling. Where are the opposing voices from our school board, our administrators, our teachers, challenging the assertion that it is necessary to scapegoat one group of people in order to teach responsibly about the history of our state and nation, because that's what anti-racist training demands.
Sir, you are at 3 minutes. I appreciate your comments. Thanks very much.
I hope you take them to heart.
Anybody else wishing to comment this evening? If not, thank you. We'll move on to old business. I don't think we have any old business this evening, so that brings us to the consent agenda. Would entertain a motion for the list. Richard, do we have a second?
Second.
Kathy? All those in favor? Unanimous. That brings us to new business. Item 10.1, discussion of Maine School Management Association board training. I'll turn that one over to Kim.
At our last board meeting, I had shared with the board that a board member had approached me with the idea of perhaps doing an Maine School Management Association training, because we have several new board members, and it might be a very good support as the board evolves. So we didn't discuss it last time. I just brought that up. I thought it would be nice to discuss it this evening if the board wants to.
So just to provide a little bit more detail on the training, Steve Bailey, the Executive Director of Maine School Management, and Maine School Management kind of has the same umbrella as the Maine School Boards Association, so they're kind of the clearinghouse for information related to state statutes describing the work of the school board, as well as practical advice around day-to-day operations of school districts and school boards. They have a training that runs approximately 70 minutes. Steve and or other staff members who specialize in policy work, they specialize in work in Augusta around educational policy as well, present the training with the opportunity to board members to obviously be interactive, ask questions, and kind of refresh how state statute describes the roles of school board members, because it's not, certainly not all as one might assume, and there are some pretty specific guardrails around how boards operate. As Kim indicated, I think a couple board members had expressed interest in this, and would be interested to hear if that is the case, that folks are interested in it, and if you are, what seems like the best time frame to do that in. I know we have some elections coming up in the towns here momentarily, so I would open it to board members and see if anyone has thoughts. Crystal?
I just have a question. Would it be Zoom or in person?
Yeah, so actually, that's a great question. If folks could or couldn't
Sorry.
hear, Chris, I didn't chuck the microphone over there, I apologize. So the training would be in person, and Steve's suggestion was to do it as a component of one of our meetings here in public, because I think it's been ages since we've done one, and I think we certainly have more participants today than we have had historically, and there are folks at home that watch our meetings as well, so it could certainly be helpful information for lots of people who aren't familiar with the information. Crystal?
Sorry, I'm very chatty tonight. I would say that I would like for the new persons elected between tomorrow in Leeds and next week in Turner. So if I don't know when they come onto the board, if it's right away or later, I think that it would be a great idea to have Steve come and do that presentation later.
And somebody will have to refresh me on, each town varies as far as when those board members are seated. Turner seats their board member immediately, and Richard is, so Turner's election is the 8th.
Yeah.
Turner's board member would be seated
They have to
immediately.
They have to go to the town office to be sworn in
Yep.
before they can come to the meeting.
Right, absolutely.
It is a meeting.
Yeah, absolutely. So since Richard has not elected to run this time, we will have a new board member from Turner, so that would be shortly. Leeds' election is tomorrow, but
Not
Kathy,
seated.
that board member is not seated until June.
30th of June is
Okay.
is present tonight.
And then I think Green's town meeting is sometime April, May. Does anybody know when Green's town meeting is? Late April?
I believe it's the 15th.
Okay. So none of us are exactly the same time, because that would be too easy. So from the head nodding and from Crystal's question, it sounds like interest would be to do this, but to get to the point where we're settled out as far as what we have for board members.
Yeah.
Is that accurate?
Great idea.
Excellent. So we will plan on that, and I think we have meetings scheduled we have 2 in June, but that wouldn't necessarily encompass that new Leeds board member. So we'll need to take a look at that.
I don't know why it would have to wait until then.
Okay.
Once the board member is elected, then
Oh, that's a great
there's
point.
no reason that they
Yes.
can't be a part of it, I would say.
Excellent. So I would anticipate that on one of our perhaps June meetings, that would be a date to shoot for, and I think we're June 2nd and June 16th. It's close to those. So we'll stay tuned on that one. We'll make sure folks are aware, and that will be on the agenda for one of those June meetings. Anything else on the board training for that agenda item? All right. So our remaining agenda item is an executive session. Crystal, you had something for other. Should we take that up before we
We can,
to answer your
that's okay.
questions?
Betsy, there's another two.
Okay. Thank you, Mrs. Mates, for that your debriefing of what's going on at Tripp Middle School. It makes me wonder, do we have the same crew type thing going on at all of the schools? I imagine it's obviously very different at an elementary level and the high school level. And do we have a district-wide work group that is specific to bullying, social emotional learning, that sort of thing? And I don't know. Sorry, Perry.
I'm really doing well with this microphone. Kim, I'll turn that one over to you, and my inclination would be a question as kind of far-reaching, because that one would make a great agenda item discussion in order for folks to have the ability to prepare for it. I think Mrs. Mates put in a fair bit of
Absolutely. I don't
preparation
need,
to that this evening.
what they all do specifically, but is there a program or a campaign, if you will, that reaches across the school that fit for the age appropriateness, but do we have something in place?
I'm
That's fine.
gonna turn over the camera.
Okay, so the short answer is yes.
Okay.
At the elementary school, we have morning meetings you heard about crew at the middle school, and we have Hornet Prime Time at the high school. We also have programs that we have throughout the schools on that. So I think the idea of an agenda item makes a lot of sense, so you can hear more information about what happens in those times and those programs.
And do we have a dedicated work group currently exploring other ideas, or whether it's administration, educators, staff, students? I know there's PBIS committees and things of that nature, but even community members, board, I know we don't participate in anything like that as a board member.
Yeah, so at this point, you're exactly right. There are committees, school-based committees that work on that kind of work. We don't have like a district-wide committee at this time.
Thank you. Joanne, actually, Richard had an item.
I actually have two items. One is a question, and I haven't heard anything about it tonight, and I have been absent, so that may be my problem. I'm asking about the status of the cafeteria at Tripp Middle School.
Yep, that's on the list of capital projects that Dean is working on getting additional details on from Siemens as far as what that might look like. That's one of the meetings that you were absent from. There was a list refreshed of various capital projects that I think the total was approximately $4.5 million of various items that didn't make it into the bond the last time. So the discussion was to continue to work on that list and figure out how best to approach those projects.
So specifically, there's nothing in this budget for 22-23 to address that?
That is correct.
Okay. The other item is, I've been looking in the newspaper the last 2 days. I have seen listings of athletes for different sports. And one of the things that leaped out to me was the number of students at Levitt Area High School who have been recognized for their academic excellence as part of our sports teams. And I found that tremendously uplifting, and I think it speaks powerfully for our quality of education at the high school. But at the same time, I ask a question, is possibly the reason for that our curriculum, our testing, our whatever, may be too simple, to be blunt, but I still want to take my hat off to those athletes who are performing as athletes, but also, more importantly for me, as scholars, receiving recognition for their academic achievements.
Always good to see positive results out there. Thank you. And I'm thinking that the other component of your question is certainly something that can be addressed as worked into administrators' reports as well versus otherwise. Joanne?
I guess I'm thinking about going back to what Crystal was talking about. And Richard's been watching athletic news. I've been watching Auburn and Lewiston and the videos that have come up with their bullying, and I live in fear that one of them is going to be us. I did a real quick search online and came up with many bullying surveys that really got at the bullying issue, like where in the school is it taking place, when is it taking place, things that you can look at and control. And I guess I'm feeling like we really need to be seriously looking at this before we find ourselves in the same position as Lewiston Auburn with their bullying issues being videotaped and projected out there for everybody to see. That's the last thing I want, except for possibly a suicide because of bullying. Those two things scare me a lot.
Yeah, I think everyone shares her concern, Joanne, and I think maybe Kim, if you recap for us where we're at time frame wise, if folks remember the school climate survey is active right now. I think both of my kids said that they had worked on that, and I think parents all received that. And I guess I would just note, check your spam folder. Mine went into my spam folder, so I just want to make sure that people double check that. That is out there. That survey closes on April 8th, so my thoughts are that the board certainly will have the opportunity to have those data points and additional discussion at once that wraps up. Kim, if you could give us a little bit more detail, and I think the suggestions and questions from this evening certainly work themselves into that discussion to continue that process.
So you're right on the timeline. It's open this week and next week. And the goal is as much participation as we can get from all of our groups, our elementary, our middle school, our high school students, our staff, and our families as well. So when that data comes back, that data can be used to develop improvement plans, depending on what those data points tell us. So when that data comes back, we will be sharing that data with the board, so you know what came back, and then we will be talking about our next steps in terms of making some plans based on it.
Thank you. So at this point, I would entertain a motion for 10.4, and that's a request for an executive session for duties of officials, appointees, and employees pursuant to 1 MRSA 4056A.
So moved.
Richard, do we have a second? Yuri for a second. All those in favor? Unanimous. Thank you, folks, for attending this evening. We'll see you next time.